Hi, welcome to my exploration of the role of the artist in modern America. First, let me explain a little bit about what motivated this probe. For several months, I've been noticing that so many celebrities are saying outrageous things. I mean, downright cruel things. Irrespective of their political ideology, there seems to be a core component of cruelty and sadism involved. There's an edge of contempt in the commentary and dialogue coming from celebrity chefs, reality TV stars, talk show hosts, musicians, anybody you can think of who belongs to the artistic class of society. And I was wondering why that is. I was wondering what function that class of society plays in these turbulent times. And what better chart to turn to answer this question or to conduct this probe than the chart for the entrance of the sun into Aries, which is a core, fundamental chart to study. The archetypes displayed by this by this kind of a chart are going to govern the entire 12-month period from one ingress into the next. And during that intervening time, the sun is going to rise and fall in dignity through the signs, conjoining and opposing and squaring and trining and sextiling all the other planets, and then returning to his root, his origin, his arche, his beginning. So, charts such as this, cast for the entrance of the sun into Aries, have been deemed prophetic for hundreds of centuries. So we could do worse than to look at this chart when we want to answer the question, what is the function of the artist and the celebrity in the American zeitgeist? Now, in answering this question, I'm going to analyze the difference between two very important classes of astrological significators. The universal significator versus the accidental significator. So a chart such as this represents the global collective. I cast it for Washington, D.C. to indicate how the American collective ties into that larger global mass. I could just as easily have said it for Cairo or Helsinki or Singapore. And I would have gotten a sketch of what those regions would experience in the coming forecast period, from one Aries Ingress until the next one in March of 2019. So, the universality of such a chart as this allows us to see the planets as representing various strata of society. Right? Jupiter would represent the nobles and the legal apparatus, the judges and senators and congressmen and parliament members and this, that, and the other. The sun would represent the monarch or the president, the prime minister. Right? Mars would represent the policemen and the criminals and the soldiers and any subversive or rebellious element in society. Saturn would represent the lawgivers, also the engineers and the scientists, as well as the lower classes. The moon would represent women, also the people generally, and Venus, she would represent our artists, the Venusian class of society, the people who adorn civilization and are supposed to make it more inhabitable thereby. In the modern world, those whose destiny it is to adorn society, well, now they're becoming political ideologues. They're becoming guardians of the collective morality, organs of manifestation for the psychic stirrings in the collective mind. And they're certainly not doing this intentionally. A lot of the cruelty, no matter how well thought out it was, a lot of the cruelty is so primitive and coarse in its nature that I'm convinced it's welling up from some otherwise ignored part of the celebrities in question's subconscious. So I'm positive that the artist is not, in individual cases, willfully and purposefully acting out her or his role in society. A lot of what's responsible for their conduct has probably largely been instinctive, unvoiced, inchoate, embryonic in their minds, blossoming in their consciousnesses. And it's only until later, after they've said something outrageous, where they may have second thoughts. Now, Venus is closely allied here with Mercury, who would, under normal circumstances, represent the media, right? Those who record and measure and calculate and write and teach and all of this. So Venus, by being conjoined with Mercury, is showing a singularity between the artists and the celebrities and the commentators, the journalists. This might be responsible for this sense of mission that many celebrities seem to have, a sense of mission that steps outside the boundaries of merely entertaining society or creating. So let's double down on this Venus to see what exactly the Venusian element of society is doing, whether they mean to or not. We note that Venus is in Aries, a fire sign. One of the important keywords of the fire signs is identity. And since Aries is a cardinal sign, taking initiative, very vigorous and energetic, then it represents the process of initiating identity. In earlier writings, I referred to America being in the midst of an identity crisis. I said this even before the elections. And I knew that America was going to be in the throes of an identity crisis after the elections. And this is what we're witnessing. The Venusian class of society, the celebrities and the artists and the musicians et al., they are performing a function, first and foremost, of shaping and contouring the new identity which is emerging, the new American identity. That's their role, whether they are aware of it or not. Right? Fire is hot and it's dry. These are the elemental qualities of all the fire signs. The fire element is hot, meaning it's always moving and active, endowed with a voracious appetite, always tweeting and communicating and posting. But it's dry too. It's the dryness of the fire element which promotes so much division. And it does this paradoxically by promoting and preserving unity. That's what the dry component of fire and earth also, that's what they do. They promote unity. Now, on the surface that sounds positive, but it's not. It's not. Think about actual physical fire. It's promoting unity by consuming the things that it comes into contact with. And on the other hand, it's promoting unity among all of those other things that don't want to be consumed. So fire divides things into camps. The camp of things that can't move and get burnt up versus the camp of things that can relocate and not get consumed. Extrapolated to the level of the artist says something outrageous and immediately society is polarized. There's the camp of people who support what the artist said versus the camp of people who oppose what the celebrity said. So the fire element is instantly polarizing, and this is a refinement of the artist's role in society. The artist's role in modern America is to shape and contour the emerging identity of Americans through divisiveness, through forcing people to line up into groups, into sides, into camps. Now, the air signs and the water signs, they have a wet component. The wet component destroys unity and promotes inclusiveness, promotes duality. Venus herself is a wet planet. She moistens, using the terminology of Ptolemy, Claudius Ptolemy, who attempted to establish astrology on a rational basis. He envisaged the planets as actually doing things. Not necessarily striking people with rays and, making them become automata. Automata is the plural for automatons. But what I'm saying is, Ptolemy is not saying that the planets are hurling bolts of radiant energy at you to make you do things. But Ptolemy saw the planets as heating things, drying them out, moistening them, cooling them off. Right? And in so doing, the planets affected the behavior of all the life under the moon. So Venus wants to create joyfulness and cheerfulness and friendliness and feasting and fun and dancing and games. And she does this through her ability to moisten, which promotes the life and continuity of creatures. It's the dry that's destructive. It's the dry component that causes death and the breakdown of things. But this is essential in the operations of nature. So Venus wants to promote friendliness. She wants to bring forth harmony, but she can't because she's in detriment in Aries. It's too dry for her. Her ability to produce friendliness will disintegrate. It disintegrates into nothing. It breaks down. Her efforts to promote fun and cheerfulness are disorganized, all because she's in detriment. Disorganized and countercultural. Now, these are the universal significations of Venus. Interestingly enough, we also have a completely different level of chart reading. And this is the level of the accidental significators. Right? Venus universally signifies art and creativity for everyone, everywhere, at all times. But since she is in the 10th house, she's determined toward 10th house matters as well. This is the accidental signification brought about by the houses. It was thought to be an accident of the cosmos that the great roulette wheel of the universe stopped at this or that point. Right? The ancient philosophers distinguished between a thing's essential nature and its non-essential nature. Right? For example, I'm a human being. That's my essence. It's my essential nature. The fact that I have red hair, that's an accident. It's not essential to what I am. I'm a human. I'm not an eggplant or a Mercedes. My essential nature is human. My non-essential natures are such that I have red hair and, like to play guitar and enjoy this, that, and the other. All of these things were considered to be accidents. So the term accident had a sort of technical meaning in ancient astrology. And it was something that was partly shown by the houses. So, in her universal guise, Venus is showing the artists, but because she's in the 10th house, now she's saying something about a royal wedding. Right? A royal wedding. I remind you that all the fire signs were considered royal signs in traditional astrology. And of course, Prince Harry married Meghan Markle this year, and during the period when this ingress is active. Right? So, if we look at Jupiter, he's saying something of the same thing that Venus is. Jupiter's not a universal significator for artists. But because he's in the 5th house, he is an accidental significator for artists. Jupiter is accidentally determined to 5th house matters. In mundane astrology such as this, the astrology of the world, as opposed to the astrology of a birth chart, a natal astrology. In mundane astrology, the 5th house is entertainment, sexuality, elections, things like that. So, Jupiter on one hand is saying something about the Stormy Daniels affair because the 5th house is sexuality. Jupiter on the other hand is saying something about potential investigations into potential election meddling because 5th house is the house of elections. But since the 5th house is the house of entertainers and artists, then Jupiter is saying something about a corpulent, obese, or rotund celebrity. Right? The retrograde of Jupiter is showing the confusion and the enmity and contention that this overweight actor and artist and celebrity is bringing to bear upon the nation. Now, most of you have figured it out by now that Jupiter is probably a symbol of Roseanne Barr. I have no doubt of that. He's an accidental significator of Roseanne Barr, but I can also think of another rotund personnage. I can think of another corpulent individual in a similar situation. I'm referencing, of course, the literature professor at Fresno State in California, Miss Jara, who made the comment about Barbara Bush. She exulted and celebrated Barbara Bush's death and drew widespread condemnation for doing that. Now, are there differences between these significators? Are there differences between Venus and Jupiter? Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest differences, of course, is that Venus is in a fire sign and Jupiter is not. So Venus showing the core role of the artist, Venus showing artists generally, the Venusian class in America generally, is splitting people up into camps. Whereas Jupiter is enraging everybody. Both sides of the political divide tend to come down on Jupiter when it makes an outrageous comment. Jara was criticized by almost everyone for her comments. Roseanne Barr was criticized by everyone for her comments. So Jupiter lacks the ability to split people up into camps. Jupiter is just wildly inappropriate. Now, in order to evaluate either of these significators for the artistic class, we have to consider Mars, because both of these significators are ruled by Mars. Venus is in Aries, which Mars rules, and Jupiter is likewise in Scorpio, which Mars rules. So the significators in question are linked to the Mars. Now, while Mars was in Capricorn, Jupiter was able to restrain itself. Jupiter wants to bring forth wisdom and sagacity, right? But because it's in Scorpio, where it has very little dignity, it has a hard time doing that. A lot depends on the condition of Mars. So while Mars was in Capricorn, Jupiter was well disposed. And Roseanne's comments, for example, were merely paranoiac and outrageous, instead of baldly and egregiously intolerable and offensive. That had to wait until Mars ingressed into Aquarius, where Mars himself is peregrine. Right? Mars is exalted in Capricorn and thus is able to offer Jupiter the resources it needs to be wise, to wisely refrain from saying something that goes truly over the top. Imagine it this way. What if you're in Las Vegas and I say, well, here, you can stay in my guest house. I have a 6,000-foot guest house. Here's a debit card with $10,000 on it for you to spend. I've stocked the guest house with food, good food too. I mean, nothing gross there. I mean, really bougie types of snacks. Now compare that to being in Las Vegas and, oh man, I'm sorry, I lied about the guest house and the debit card doesn't exist. I just wanted you to come over here and I really, don't want to talk to you anymore. What's your experience like in both of those situations? Well, that's what Jupiter is experiencing. While Mars was in Capricorn, Jupiter had the guest house, he had the debit card, he had the resources he needed to bring forth the wisdom he wants to bring forth. But when Mars was also in a peregrine condition, then Jupiter lacked those resources. But both the universal significator for the artist class and the accidental significator for the artistic class, both of these are ruled by Mars, which means that both of them have an agenda to separate. Mars represents breaking with people, breaking with the past, and Venus, in the sign of her detriment, is forced to go along with that. It's like Venus is inebriated. Somebody slipped her a roofie. No, better, somebody slipped her a hallucinogenic mushroom. She's not herself. She can't create the friendliness and cheer that she ordinarily would want to create. She's forced to gaze critically upon Libra, the sign that she rules. Libra is a wet sign. It's hot and it's wet. It lacks the dry component of Aries. It lacks that destructive dryness, which forever wants to separate things into their proper categories. Oh, you're a Democrat? Okay, well, you're going to go to hell. Oh, you're a Republican? Oh, okay, well, you're definitely going to go to hell. Oh, you're this, you're that, you're my enemy. Libra doesn't do that. Its wetness is inclusive. So Venus is forced to be critical of that Libran process of including others. There's no sense of balancing going on here. In other words, balance is not even desired. Remember, the identity is at stake, Aries. Now, the ascendant of America is, in my opinion, fiery as well. It's Sagittarius. So these identity issues are part and parcel of the American fabric. And those of you who are familiar with my work and familiar with the profection cycle might remember that the election year of 2016 was a first house year for this nation, a year where the identity is going to be first and foremost. It's going to be a vital element of American life, a vital question in the American milieu, the identity. Right? Sagittarius is all about learning what the identity is and adapting to that knowledge. Aries is all about experimenting with the identity, shaping it and forming it, becoming aware of what the identity is. I like to compare Aries to the process whereby we hear our voices played back to us for the first time. Dear God, do I really sound like that? That's Aries, this blossoming of self-awareness. So the nation collectively is trying to become aware of itself. The nation collectively is hearing its voice played back to it for the first time and saying, Jesus Christ, do I really sound like that? And the artist, generally speaking, is brokering and catalyzing that process. Now, examining the aspects might help us here as well. Right? Venus and Mercury are both in an applying aspect, an applying square with Pluto. The fact that these two are applying to Pluto is very important, because in applying, they're swifter planets, so they are moving closer and closer to a perfected square with Pluto. They're not there yet. They're moving closer to it. Once they got to 21 degrees in 2 minutes of Aries, then they were separating from Pluto. But as it stands, when the sun entered into Aries and this chart was cast, Mercury and Venus were applying to Pluto. And the square between these planets is growing tighter and tighter. This has different interpretive outcomes. First of all, it means that Venus, the artist's, Venus is pushing something to Pluto. Venus is committing her disposition to Pluto. Now, this is meant to be understood as management responsibilities. Pluto is the subversive element in society. Pluto is the capacity to renew and regenerate. So the artist class in America, whether it knows it or not, is hell-bent on stimulating this regeneration through an attitude of antagonism. Right? Now, Venus is in her detriment. First of all, this tells us that the artistic role in this nation is not going to really accomplish what the artists and the celebrities want to accomplish. The efforts are going to be disjointed. The efforts will fall apart. The armies, quote unquote, speaking metaphorically here, that these individuals are likely to summon up will disperse and scatter at the moment of battle. So Venus, in her attempt to transfer her responsibilities to Pluto, the regenerating element of society, Venus will fail in that attempt. Now, the way I interpret this is that there's something deep down inside each and every one of these individuals, from Samantha Bee to Roseanne Barr to Miss Jara over in Fresno and many, many others. There's something anarchic and nihilistic inside of them that probably would no doubt be pleased if brawls erupted into the streets tomorrow. They would feel as if their intellectualism, They would feel as if their ideology stimulated some kind of change. And so while their rational minds probably are not articulating the thought, I think I'll foment rebellion and anarchy today, again, there is something deep inside that I think is responding to the symbolism of this chart and compelling them to try to transfer their management over to Pluto, the people who will take to the streets, the people who will riot. But because Venus is in detriment, she can't quite do it. Pluto, for his part, it's dubious whether Pluto can even receive that management. We don't really know what Pluto's qualities are like. In spite of all the fine scholarship done on this planet, there just simply hasn't been enough time. Mercury and Venus, for example, we've got thousands of years of observation on them, a huge corpus of opinion on these planets to draw from. Pluto, I don't even know if we have a century's worth of literature on it yet. So we don't know what Pluto can do in Aries really, which means that we don't know what Pluto can do with the management and responsibility that Venus is trying to push onto him. Now, if you're interested at all in this nomenclature or language of pushing when planets are aspecting each other, if you're interested in this concept of transferring power and responsibility and things like that through the aspect, then you can understand a little bit more what I mean if we examine the aspect between the Sun and Mars. Right? The Sun is also applying to a square of Mars. They're separated by a degree and 42 minutes. The Sun is swifter than Mars, so the Sun is applying. The Sun is, simply by applying, transferring its management responsibilities to Mars. But because the Sun is in its exaltation, the Sun is transferring something of its power and its strength over to the Mars. So we can see this, for example, in the person of Pompeo, the emissary, the president's emissary to North Korea. When Pompeo goes to talk to the North Koreans, he goes with the authority of the president and by extension the people of the United States of America. This is shown by the transfer of responsibility and strength and power to Mars, and the Sun is capable of doing that because he's in the sign of his exaltation. Mars, for his part, receives the Sun and himself is in the sign of his own exaltation, which will help him when he transfers responsibilities and strength over to Saturn. So this affects the quality of the square, makes it less square-like. Okay? It makes this square more benign and cooperative. Pompeo certainly is not going to antagonize the president. He's going to do the mission to which he is entrusted. So, to summarize, I believe the role of the artist in modern America is to shape and contour the emerging identity, the emerging American identity, and to also exert an influence and control over the 2020 elections. And if possible, to foment some kind of Plutonian regeneration. Not necessarily a violent kind, certainly. I do believe that the artistic class of America are well-intentioned. Now, all of this raises the question of whether people like Samantha Bee and Roseanne Barr and the professor over at Fresno State, whether these people should be forgiven or whether these people were not in their right faculties or not responsible. They had diminished capacity because Jupiter made them do it. Venus made them do it. I would say no, absolutely not. Roseanne Barr didn't have to be the small fry. She didn't have to, pick up the baton of cruelty and meanness. Some other corpulent celebrity would have. Roseanne Barr could have passed. Miss Jara could have passed. Samantha Bee could have passed and let some other celebrity say the inappropriate thing. Let some other celebrity pick up the mantle of identity definition and election shaping that the artists and celebrities of this nation are currently doing. Now, there's one final interesting feature of this ingress chart, which sort of relates to our question, and that is the cardinal ascendant which rises. Right? According to this cardinal ascendant, we are now going to have to revolve the year throughout the rest of the quarters, meaning we're going to have to cast an ingress chart for the sun's entrance into Cancer at the summer solstice, then his entrance into the first degree minute of Libra, right, at the autumnal equinox, and then the winter solstice when he enters into the first degree and minute of Capricorn. We have to do charts for all of those. If the ascendant of the ingress were mutable, then we would just do another ingress chart in the autumn, and that's it. Right? But if the ascendant is fixed, then this one chart will dispose over the entire year. But because of the cardinal ascendant, we have to look at all of them, which we're not really going to do in this video. I'll reserve analysis of these until later, maybe shortly before the season starts. But one interesting thing to do is to look at these charts, and then because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which is the sign that the sun enters into, we would kind of home in on Jupiter here in the 5th. Now, this doesn't mean that Roseanne Barr is going to get another crack at offending America. I think my original logic might take hold at this time from summer to autumn, where the emphasis is going to be on the Stormy Daniels debacle. The emphasis might be on the investigation into the alleged election meddling. In other words, the more legalistic component of the Jupiter might come into play during the Cancer ingress. But then look at the Libra ingress. Venus is in Scorpio, again in detriment, so the artistic class is again sort of dysfunctional. Right, the sun representing the president is in the 5th house, and this is almost certainly showing some sort of involvement with, election stuff or Stormy Daniels stuff. And then finally, the Capricorn ingress has Mars in the house of the president, the 10th. And, many other astrologers would probably look at this Mars and be predicting the worst. They would say something about a downfall or this or that. But they would be missing the fact that the sun is beneath the horizon. This little blue squiggly line here is the horizon, and the sun is beneath it. So this is a nocturnal chart, and Mars is a nocturnal planet. He rules all the water signs at night. He is the triplicity ruler of all the water signs at night, and therefore he represents victory and leadership. He does not represent a downfall. Above and beyond this, Mars is in his terms and his decan. He's practically loaded down with dignity, arguably with more dignity in Pisces here in this chart than Jupiter would have. And this is characterizing the President of the United States during this ingress in the winter solstice. Now, in addition to doing ingress charts, I'm also fond of looking at solar return charts for America as well, which is a completely different beast. That will be the subject of another video as America approaches its birthday in July. When we get closer to that point, then I might put something up about the astrology of America, and I'll probably definitely put something up about the upcoming solar return year for America. The ingress chart and the solar return charts, I tend to take them as units to get a bigger, more full picture of what's going to what the important events and people in the year are going to be. So this is all I have for now. I've concluded my exploration of the role of the artist in American society. I think it's safe to say that that role is to divide people up into camps, divide people into factions, with the goal of pitting them against each other in the election contest in 2020, with another subsidiary goal of helping to refine and define America's emerging identity. That's the role of the artist in modern America. Thank you for watching.